Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, carrying out your charitable wishes forever, whether it's helping shelter animals, feeding the homeless, enhancing the arts, or supporting students. Learn more at leaveabequest.org.
Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Hamley. Today marks the beginning of our 13th year on the radio. Yay! Happy anniversary to us. Actually, it's thank you day to our listening audience, because without your support, we would not be here. Thank you for inviting us into your life every Thursday at noon, and for being willing to experience another view of our society. Now, sometimes our subjects are tough, and other times they are just plain fun, like today's show. Guess what, y'all? It's storytelling time. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be thoroughly entertained. Right after this news from NPR and WHRO News.
Discussing today's topics from an African-American perspective, this is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Hamley. You know, one of the really cool things about listening to NPR are the stories. A good story is the best way to get up close and personal with the subject. Engaging stories allow the listener to engage on a visceral level. It's a way to connect, empathize, relate, and understand. And if you love hearing good stories, you're in luck, because there's a storytelling festival coming to the city of Hampton, and guess what? It's free. And here to tell us all about it are two seasoned storytellers, Janice J. Johnson. Hey, Jay.
Hey, hi, Barbara.
How are you? So glad to have you on the show today. And Sheila Arnold, fondly known as Ms. Sheila. Hello,
Hey,
Ms. Sheila.
Good to be here.
Thank you, ladies, so much. So tell me about this massive festival that's happening in Hampton.
Okay, the Hampton Storytelling Festival, which is also known as Everybody's Got a Story, starts out with a weekend in which national storytellers are there, the 14th to the 16th.
Of July.
Right, of this month. And on the last weekend is a local storytelling showcase where people who've gone through auditions and people who have been invited to a local tellers will be on stage for one performance. Oh, wow. The week in between we call the Storytelling Academy. So we will be tutoring people who've gone through the auditions from the first weekend. We will be doing storytelling and, exploring storytelling, helping people tell their stories in different locations. Mm-hmm. The first weekend, we're going to be all over the city of Hampton because we're trying to get storytelling to the neighborhood level. One of the things this is about is not just storytelling. It's also about the fact that in our world today, people are talking at each other and not to each other. And storytelling is one of the best ways to communicate, to break out, and unify people and have communities come together. And so we will be all over the city. So everyone who's listening should go to www.hamptonstorytelling.art, ART.
Okay, HamptonStorytelling.art to get the full schedule.
Absolutely.
But so this starts though on Friday, July the 14th,
correct,
and goes through the 22nd of the month.
Right.
And there's something happening in different locations everywhere. You spend time with Sheila with children also. Mm-hmm. Children can tell stories?
Oh, children can definitely tell stories. I told stories when I was a kid, and I am absolutely certain you did. Now, children don't know when to stop telling stories, and so that's what you have to help them to do. But yeah, children are extraordinary. They visualize it, they can see it, and the more that you read to kids, the more that you let their imagination roll, the more that they can create. And that's what storytelling is a lot of times, is just a creation of.
And you're actually doing working with children during that week
correct?
Mm-hmm. And again, it's free.
Yes, yes.
This year it's free,
It
right?
is, and we're doing an intergenerational storytelling academy on Wednesday, 6:15 to 7:45 over at Hampton Christian Church on Mercury Boulevard, and that's for people to come with your grandchildren, with your children, with your mother, with and to share stories together and learn how to share stories together. So if you think your kids don't want to hear you, it's not true. They just need to tell them stories, not lecture.
Not lecture. So why is oral history, telling stories, so important to all communities, but particularly for the African American community?
Well, the first thing we need to just recognize is that storytelling is the first art. It is the first art. Every other art comes from that. Dance tells a story through movement, and song tells a story through song. But it's a story. It's the conversation. It was, why we're sitting across from one another. And in the African American community, we started with the oral tradition. It was passed down orally. Our lineages, our heritage, our lessons, our conversations, our humor was passed down orally. Mm-hmm. And the oral tradition is just as important, if not more so, than the written tradition. Oftentimes we think, well, once it's written down, that becomes important. That makes a civilization. That's not true. The oral tradition is how we kept things alive and how we change things over time. As an oral tradition, you can move from one space to the other, and move your animal that you might have in a story from being a turtle over in Ghana to being a rabbit over in the United States to something else in another part of the country. That oral tradition can move and change. And when you had a time when enslaved people didn't have the written word, they had the stories. They could take everything they wanted from us, but you can't take away that which is implanted and written inside of your heart and your ears and your mind. And the oral tradition is still important today. We need to share our histories and our and people want to hear the histories, but they don't want it like a class. Like, you learn this and I'm not going to tease, but 1619 is a great thing. What is the story of 1619? That's the thing that moves people's hearts and moves people to want to know more history.
So Jay, you say that you call yourself a newbie, that you're fairly new to this. What got you into storytelling?
I'm the oldest one, but the newest teller at this event. Okay. Well, when I retired, I kept saying I was going to write a story about my grandfather. And my former boss and I are still friends in retirement. And Sydney called me up one night, and she said, "How's that book going?" I said, "It's terrible." She said, "Come over to Norfolk with me. There's a storytelling performance, and I think you should see it." And so I did. I came over here, and Sheila's class was performing. And I said, "Oh, okay, where is your next class?" So I went to 2 classes under her instruction at the Muse. And then she told me, "Stop doing this. You're natural." So that was great, So, hey, I've been doing it ever since, pandemic or not, but it's fun. I love it. And I'm kind of a history buff, so doing the research and that kind of thing all fits with kind of like who I am.
All comes in there together. Well, guess what? Why don't we hear a story? All right, so Jay is going to tell us the story. It's called Up a Tree. Is that right? Up a Tree,
yes.
Okay.
It was that kind of spring day that's still kind of muggy. But kids don't care whether it's muggy or not. What they cared about was where they were playing, which was in the side yard of Miss Catherine's house. I don't know if Mr. Catherine and Mr. Horace owned the side yard, but Mr. Horace kept it cut. And I think he kept it cut because the house next door, either a shot house or maybe a house of ill repute, he wanted some space, But we were there playing, and I was the only girl in a radius of 2 blocks. So I'm playing with Johnny Boy and Leon and Oliver. And they're not happy because on any given day, we would be jumping the ditches behind Oliver's house and playing in the woods over there. But our parents told us that it hadn't rained, and so the ditch water was putrid. Well, we didn't know what putrid meant, but it sounded awful, so we're not going to do that. And then they didn't want us in the woods because this guy had taken up residence in the woods. And he'd come and buy some sterno, and the neighbors hadn't quite figured out who he was yet. I think he was probably just a veteran whose mind had kind of gone bad in the war, but they were not sure. So we are out of the woods, we're out of the ditches, and we're playing in the side yard. And on top of that, the other reason is the boys don't have any marbles. Because we would be playing marbles if we dared doing those other things. So here we are playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, red light. Mother, may I? Oh my gosh. And they hated it and so did I. Well, they looked around. Now, what you have to realize, I'm the only girl. I'm short and I'm more than a little chubby. So I get picked on when I'm not being played with. So they looked around, and Oliver, who's my biggest competition neighborhood, says, I bet you can't climb the tree in front of Miss Catherine's house. And I said, of course I can. I just have to get to the low branches, Oh, we'll help you get up there. So all three of them march over there with me, boost me into the lower branches of Miss Catherine's tree, and up I go. Oh, I'm at the top of the front porch roof. Oh, no, how about the second-story window? Oh, yeah, I can do that. Well, at this point, I'm walking around the tree and up the tree, I'm kind of, because I got to get to the heavier branches, so it's not just up, it's also going around. And then I get up there, and I can see in Miss Catherine's bedroom. Oh, my goodness. I'm really up here. And I look down, nobody there. All the boys are gone. Well, when I thought about it, I couldn't really blame them because it was a gotcha. They couldn't play marbles because I had all their marbles. I'm the marbles champion of the neighborhood. So I'm up the tree. Nobody knows I'm up here. And I'm looking around, and I see my mother across the street in our backyard. And I know she's looking for me because of where she's looking. She looks in the garage, peeks in, no. She kind of tries to look up on the roof, no. Looks under the porch, no. And so finally, my mother, who is the ultimate of dignity, propriety, and good taste, has to yell my nickname for the whole neighborhood to hear. Sugar! I hear her. I'm not saying anything. She looks up and down the street. Lincoln Street. She walks over to the curb, look up and down, see if I'm anywhere. Sugar! Nothing. Third time. Sugar! Well, I don't know about you, but when your mother yells the third time, you are about to get skinned. You are really on the border of real trouble. So I said, yes! 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 She's looking around, yes. Where are you? Up the tree in front of Miss Catherine's house. What? My mother looks up and there's her daughter in a tree. She walks to the base of the tree. She says, come down. I said, no, Mama, no. I said, come down. No, Mama, don't make me come down. I can't do it. I am not calling the fire department to get my daughter out of a tree. Come down now. Well, okay. I'll help you. You got up there. Come down the same way. Just reverse the course. Just come on down. Limb. I only did this at the apple tree in Aunt Perkins. That was a bush. This is a tree. I know, but you're going to come down. Meanwhile, a neighbor's passing. He scopes out the situation. He's just laughing. My mother says, are you going to the store? He said, yes. She said, will you tell my husband to come over here, please, so we can get this child out of the tree? So my dad walks over. My dad is like 6'2" and about 5 foot wide. I love him to death. I am his shadow. We are conspirators in life. And he comes over and he sees me in the tree and he keeps a straight face. He turns his back to my mother and he lifts me out of the tree, grinning like, what? He sets me down. He turns around and says, my mom, we're through? She said yes, because secretly she blames him for me being a tomboy. He goes back to the store and she looks at me and I know I am shrinking, as I'm looking at her because I know I am going to get the whipping of my life. My mother is the disciplinarian of the family, and she has several things that she can use to discipline. And she looks at me, and I am just soaking wet.
Oh, no.
And she says, I think maybe you have learned your lesson about trees. We're not going to do this again, are we? We? Oh, no. No, Mom, no. Okay, that's it. Let's go get you cleaned up.
What a great story. know something? You mentioned Lincoln Street, which I know is in Hampton.
Yes.
One of the things about this storytelling festival is that you guys are really bringing it home in terms of neighborhoods and what happens when you grow up there.
Right. That's right. Yes. And I grew up on the corner of Backward Road and Lincoln Street. That's where I was born. So I'm going to be telling stories at the Mary Winston Jackson News Center in Hampton on Friday night from 5, I think, to 7 o'clock. And so that'll be one of the stories I tell. The other will be about my Girl Scout leader, who was Mary Winston Jackson.
Oh, wow.
From the time I was brownish to senior, she was my Girl Scout leader. And we did not know she was an engineer at NASA.
Wow.
So it's a good story about relationships of adults and children.
That is fantastic.
That's the first story I ever heard, was that story about Mary Jackson.
About Mary Jackson.
Yeah, that was just awesome.
See, now we're gonna have to come out so we can see it and hear it. The stories, but anyone can come to the Storytelling Festival, isn't that right, Sheila?
Yes, anybody can come from wherever you are. Come on in, and there's lots of different venues. I do want to let people know that you're going to hear different stories at every venue. So even if you follow a storyteller around all weekend, you'll hear different stories every day. In every program, they'll have a different story. So no repeats.
All right.
And we need to also tell people that every day there's an all-tellers show. There's one all-teller performance
so
per
that means
day.
all of the tellers
Every teller is going to be on the stage.
And for those of you, since we are on NPR, there are a couple of storytellers that you will be familiar with. One is Bill Lepp, who is going to be performing, and the other one is Jessica Robinson. Thank you. Yes, and both have been on PBS and NPR. So, so plan on coming out and enjoying this because this is a lot of fun. Okay, so Sheila, Ms. Sheila, as they call you, you're up next, and you have a story called Red Hair.
She woke up in the morning and stretched her arms, then went over to her window, which had some of the sunlight filtering through her shutters. She moved back the curtains, and she opened the window, threw the shutters wide open, and let the sun come in. She closed the window up, and she began to get dressed and ready for her day. She always made sure she put on her antique rose lipstick. She had twists in her hair with red that was dyed red at the top, and that's why people called her Red Hair. And whenever she went out of the house, she would take a light jacket. At the bottom of the stairs, she would pick up her basket. And as she picked up her basket, she would go out the door. And she would go into the community with that basket. She would go into the community, and she would listen to people and talk to people. She'd hear what their concerns were. She would give advice where she could. She would help and understand and listen. And that's what she did. And not only did she do her community, but she went to the next community around and the next community around. That's what she did. Along the way, she would meet wolves, because wolves are real. There were wolves that were gray and wolves that were gray, wolves that were black, wolves that were brown, wolves. Sometimes a wolf would come up and say something, and she'd just look at him and just roll her eyes. It's so insane what they said. Sometimes they would say something that was just, something she couldn't stand. And so she would tell them and say, "Don't you ever speak to me like that again. Ever speak to me like that again." And sometimes they would say something that would make her feel fearful and worried, afraid. And she would walk away from them as quickly as she could, hoping for safety. You see, in her basket, she carried things she gave. She gave faith and hope, love, courage. And she would take those things out of her basket and give them to the people she met as she went along, giving and giving. But sometimes there were people that wanted something with a little more substance. That's how it was with Annie Mae. Annie Mae was craving something with a little more substance, needing something that would help her in those difficult days as she was having the shakes and the concerns. And so she went to a wolf and she offered to get that something of substance from him. And the wolf said he'd give it to her, but not for something she could pay with. No, what he wanted was red hair. And that is why red hair was there at Annie Mae's house. Annie Mae had called her over, and she had been at Annie Mae's house before with her basket, and she didn't pay any mind as Annie Mae let her into the foyer, and she didn't notice as Annie Mae locked the 2 locks on the door, and she didn't pay any mind as she prattled along, and she only stopped when she walked into the living room and she saw him. And she quickly turned and faced Annie Mae, and Annie Mae, her face stricken with fear and sadness, lowered her head. It would be in its own time when Annie Mae would gather herself, her clothes, her basket, and she began to walk through the hallway to the door. There at the door stood Annie Mae, her head still down. She tried to reach out, Annie Mae did, to touch red hair, but red hair shook her off, repelling from her touch, and unlocked the 2 locks and ran out the door and ran all the way home. And when she got home, she locked the locks. She put the bolt in, and she put the lock to close the doors, all of the locks on the doors that she could use, and she closed every window and locked it, and she closed the curtains, and she remained inside. But the community had heard what had happened to red hair, and the community remembered what red hair had brought to each of them. And so they began to demand for something to be done about the wolf. They went over to the panther who was judge and said he should be brought to you. But the panther said, I have no crime against him. They went over to Fox, who was brother to Wolf, and said, you should bring him in. And Fox said, am I my brother's keeper? They went to Bear, who brought in the folks to make sure they were under law and order, and he said, I don't have space for him. They went and they called on the eagle of justice, and the eagle just flew high above their heads and did not set. But the people had received much from the baskets of red hair. And so they persisted. And they called upon them and called upon them, and they called upon them until finally Fox brought Wolf in, and Bear put him behind bars, and Judge set before him and called him guilty, and the eagle of justice came down and planted itself, and justice was seen. But the people did not just hear and defend red hair. No, they went to her door. They knocked. But she did not come to the door. And so the people left baskets on her step. And they would come by again and again, leaving baskets upon baskets. And in time, much time, for some pains required time. In time, she came down the stairs one day. She unlocked some of the locks, keeping the chain lock on so she could look out and see if anyone was there. And she looked down and saw the baskets. She took off the chain lock and began to bring the baskets in, and then quickly put the locks back on the door and remained behind closed doors. after even more time. One day, Red Hair awoke, and the light from the sun filtered through her window. She got up out of her bed, and she moved the curtains back, and she lifted the window up, and she threw the shutters open, and she cluttered, and she closed the window and let the sun pour upon her. And she began to dress to leave. But in those baskets, they had brought her lots of ribsticks. She had ruby red now. She had mauve. And she put on whatever she felt like that day. In those baskets, some had put long extensions, and she had had them put in her hair, and now her red hair hung down her back. She was given a red jacket that fit her perfectly. And she went downstairs to get one of the many baskets she had now. And she opened her door, unlocking the lock. She opened the door, and she went out with her basket, and she went back into the community and listened and understood and gave advice and gave from her basket to all who would accept. But sometimes she got tired, and she would stay at home. But that is when the community came to her. And this was just the story of Red Hair going into the neighborhood, doing all she can.
Wow. I mean, talk about taking you from up and down and back up again. Oh, that was fabulous. If you're just joining us, we're listening to stories from professional storytellers Ms. Sheila Arnold and Janice J. Johnson in advance of the Hampton Storytelling Festival, which is July 14th through 22nd. More information is at hamptonstorytelling.art. hamptonstorytelling.art. 440-757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. What do you think about storytelling? Have you been to a storytelling festival? What is it that draws you in? We'd love to hear from you. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. The pictures that the two of you paint are so vivid. I mean, as I'm sitting here listening to you, and you can just see it as you're speaking. Is that one of the secret sauce, if you will, to being a good storyteller? Janice, I'll let you go first.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And the more invigorated you are, the more you're into the story, you can see people coming with you, and they're up the tree with me, so
and I can see your mama's calling you too.
Absolutely.
And Sheila, you use your whole body, when you're telling a story. Why is that important to you?
Well, when you can't see it on the radio, but hopefully you can still feel it on the radio. But it's in the oral tradition. You use everything on you. So when people are looking at you, they don't just see the story, hear the story in their ears. They see it with their eyes. So the things that I don't have to say when I'm in public, that there are things even in this story that I wouldn't actually have said out loud. They would just see that what I have done.
You knew exactly.
And such. Mm-hmm. So that's really, and the thing is that the more senses that you use in a story, the better a story will stay with people. The longer a story stays with people.
And the pauses I mean, so can anybody be a storyteller? Do you think?
Everybody has a story.
There you go.
But it's like asking the question, can anybody be a radio announcer? Can anybody do their own radio show or be a producer like our producers back there? Anybody could do that, but they might not do it well, and they might not be doing it for anything more than just being with their family or talking to their kids, and that is awesome. And so everybody has a story. And if they want to share that story in broader sense, they probably need to get some encouragement, help, direction, those kind of things. And that's part of what we do as storytellers as well.
In terms of doing it professionally. But everybody, when you go to the family reunion or whatever, there's always that uncle, there's always that cousin, there's always that storyteller that's in there, correct?
Oh, yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You can get in trouble with those folk. Lord have mercy.
Yeah.
I told a story one time in my family reunion. I made up a story using something that one of my great aunts had said, and I made up this great story. I thought it was lovely, and I made her the youngest in the story. Well, my real aunt, great aunt, who was the real youngest, she was hot. She was hot. I mean, the whole family loved the story except for her. She's like, that is not true, and that would not have happened. And I'm like, it was just a story. It was a pretend story. It wasn't real. So.
757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. All right, the numbers to call. Are you a storyteller? If you are, give us a call and let us hear from you. 757-440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Let's see. Let's talk to Ed in Hampton. Hi, Ed. You're on the air.
Lisa.
Now, this is Barbara. Hi, Ed.
Oh, Barbara. I'm sorry. Barbara. Lisa. I have Lisa on my mind. I met many Lisas I was in love with.
Oh my! That's a story right now.
There's a story.
Good story.
But I still love them. Isn't that wonderful?
Yes, absolutely.
Listen, you are wonderful.
Oh.
I have listened to your show for 17 years since you were first on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I heard your first show.
Oh,
and
my.
it revolutionized WHRV.
Yes.
You are amazing, and this station is the best station in the entire country.
Well, thank you very much,
Jay
Ed.
Sennett is one of my best friends. I've ever met him, but I feel like I know him. I kept my teeth on Jay Sennett. He teaches jazz.
Yes.
He demonstrates jazz. He's not like that young lady that just gave the story. It comes alive even through radio.
Excellent.
Jazz.
That's what we wanted to hear. And thanks so much for the call. We really appreciate it. And I hope you'll come to the Storytelling Festival. There you go. All right. So,
Barbara, can I tell you just a little bit about some of our other tellers?
Sure,
just a really
absolutely.
brief thing. So it's you've heard Jay, you've heard myself. We also are going to have Bill Lepp, who is also a nationally known storyteller, who is usually known for his lies. He's really good. He's a great liar. He's won the Liars Contest in West Virginia more times, so he cannot participate anymore. And he just happens to be a United Methodist preacher. So I won't say anything about how that correlates, but he's great. But he also has this amazing World War II program that he is presenting on Saturday, July 15th at 10 o'clock at the VFW Post in Hampton. In Phoebus. And it's based on the oral storytelling he did of one of the older gentlemen that he knows. Absolutely. There's a part where he comes through Hampton Roads. The person comes through Hampton Roads. So that's great. And then Dylan Pritchett is just our own treasure here in Hampton Roads. Dylan has been telling stories. He used to work at Colonial Williamsburg. He's been doing stories and drums, and he's written his own book. And he works with the National Association of Black Storytelling. Absolutely phenomenal man. And most people know, in this area, Dylan more than they know anybody else that's on our list. Jessica Robinson has her own show called Better Said Than Done that has been online during the pandemic and is live as well, back to being live and still doing online. And she has just really taking, usually it's personal stories, and she has just done amazing amounts of work in making the personal stories come alive. And she also coaches people. She, does video work. She is extraordinary. I have loved watching and walking beside her as she has just increased what happens in storytelling.
Yeah,
and
she was also on PBS.
Yes.
Stories from the Stage.
Yes.
Yep.
She's amazing. And then Lynn Ruhlman, who is one of my storytelling girlfriends. We have a group of us that gather together. We've done it for years, called Storytelling Girlfriends. And Lynn Ruhlman lives right here in Norfolk, and is extraordinary. She's an artist. She creates collages and amazing things. But her storytelling is usually personal stories, although she does folk tales and fairy tales, and she just has a smile when she talks, and you just love walking into her stories. I just love being around her, and her heart just flows over. So we have you're going to get a lot of different types of stories. So there's going to be lots of variety in the stories that you get. And that's one of the things that we want people to make, we want you to hear lots of different things. You may not like one thing, but you'll like another. So, and that's what we hope to bring to the table.
Storytelling Festival. .art, correct? That is the website to go to find out all the different venues and the different times and so forth. All right, so let's tell another story. Jay, I think this one is you. The FBI comes to Hampton.
It is the year maybe about 1942, 43. And Miss Nettie is in her kitchen on Back River Road, and she looks down the street and she sees these two strange men on the corner of Back River Road and Lincoln Street. And they're not strange because they're white, but they're strange because on a hot August day, when old people would say you could fry an egg on the sidewalk, these men are all dressed in black, including hats. The only white thing she can see is a shirt. And they're talking to each other, and she's just saying, any decent Southern white man would be in a short-sleeved shirt, and white pants. I know they're not from here. But she watched, and she saw them looking up the street, and they're looking in the direction of her house. And she's not really surprised because her house, 2 stories, the biggest house in the art block of Back River Road. But she keeps in her kitchen, and she's watching them. And sure enough, they arrive at Miss Nettie's door, and they knock. Well, let me tell you, to everybody in the neighborhood, Miss Nettie is not an easy person on any day. But on this day, Miss Nettie is even worse because the last of her 5 sons has been drafted into the Army. So she is not a woman you want to talk to on this day. So she comes to the door, said, this is Agent Adams, and I'm Agent Monroe, and we're from the FBI. And we're here to ask you about Evelyn Dolores Johnson, also known as Dolly. We need to know if you know her. Miss Nettie said, what kind of trouble could this young woman be in? I am not going to do this. I have no idea who you're talking about. Well, ma'am, she lived right up the street. That's where she grew up. Evelyn Dolores Johnson, also known as Dolly. She said, I don't know who you're talking about. Do you have anything else you want to ask? No, ma'am. They didn't expect that response. And Miss Nettie closed her door, which had been open, and went back to the kitchen. But she stopped at her side window, and she watched those agents going across the street. And then she knows they're going to Josephine's house. So she gets to the phone, Josephine, you see those men come across the street, those white men? Yeah, Nettie, I see them. What's the matter? They're going to ask you about Dolly Johnson. They're here in the FBI, and they talk about Dolly Johnson. I told them I didn't know anyone that had that name. You hear me? Oh, yeah, Nettie, I hear you. Don't worry about a thing. Okay, all right. Yeah, all right. Let me hang up, Nettie, on my porch. And she hung up, opened the door, and she said, you gentlemen, you're so hot. Listen, why don't you come in and sit down? I just made some iced tea, and I'll go to my icebox and get you some. You need to sit down because you're going to get a heat stroke out here. Well, normally they wouldn't do this, but they were hot. They came into Miss Josephine's house and sat on her nice little floral-covered, sofa, knees almost up to their chins. And she came out, put this iced tea pitcher on the middle of the table and gave them 2 glasses. She said, well, what can I help you with? They said, we're here to talk about Evelyn Dolores Johnson, also known as Dolly. We need to know if you know her. Ooh, Evelyn, what? Evelyn Dolores Johnson, also known as Dolly. Do you know her? I don't think I know anybody by that name. That's a lot of name. I don't think so. So they tried one more time, and she still said she didn't know him. So she said, you need some more tea? And they said, well, no, not really. She said, well, where are you going when you leave here? They said, oh, we're going to the house next door to talk to Miss Ward over there. Oh, okay. Well, you all finished the tea. I got to check on my clothes on the line. So Miss Ward didn't have a phone. Miss Josephine goes out the back door, rushes over to Miss Ward's house, and now besides, Miss Ward is really new to the block. She really does not know this person, but just in case she's heard anything, she said, Claire. She said, yeah, Miss Josephine, what's the matter with you? The FBI agent sitting in my living room, and they're going to come over here and ask you about Evelyn Dolores Johnson, also known as Dolly. Miss Ward said, I have no idea who that is. She said, good, you keep saying that. And she went back to her house, goes to the back door just as the FBI agents are getting up. Well, for the whole day, those FBI agents went up and down Back River Road trying to find somebody who knew Evelyn Dolores Johnson, also known as Dolly. But what they didn't know was Miss Nettie was on the phone with everybody she knew had a phone, and Miss Josephine was on her feet with everybody who didn't have a phone. And so all of those people declared they did not know this woman. About 2 weeks later, Evelyn Dolores Johnson, also known as Dolly, called her mother. Mama, would you please talk to the neighbors? Mother said, about what? Because they didn't go to the Johnsons to ask about their daughter. She said, what am I supposed to be talking to them about? She said, I'm trying to get a job at the federal government. I was going to surprise you, but the neighbors keep denying they know me. I'm not in trouble. I'm just trying to get a job. Would you please tell them to say they know me? Okay, something. Otherwise, this doesn't make sense. Well, evidently, this happened a lot in the 40s. So eventually, the FBI did come back. All of the neighbors knew Evelyn Dolores Johnson, also known as Dolly. Wonderful girl, smart, went to Howard, blah, 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 So she got a job. My aunt went to work at the Strategic Services whatever
thing, yeah.
And, which had been set up by Franklin Delano Roosevelt to take intelligence. This department later became the CIA. My aunt worked for the CIA for 35 years.
Wow.
Evelyn Dolores Johnson, also known as Dolly.
Amen.
That is hilarious.
That's true. That is true.
That's a true story.
That's a true story.
See, that's back when neighbors knew each other.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, that is hilarious. Okay. Alrighty, so.
Goodness gracious.
Sheila? You're up next, and I think you have one.
I don't even want to follow that. That's not even right. That ain't even right.
Called Not a Statistic Yet.
Well, I'm going to have to start with something funny because I'm just like, I'm going to be the down person. Ain't nobody going to come see me because I got to follow that.
Okay. So do whatever one you want.
I'm going to do a quickie on both things. I'll do a little bit of both of those stories. So, amen. So I have a son. I have one son, and it's Chris, and he probably is not listening right now, so I can talk about him. But it doesn't matter. I talk about him in front of him. So if y'all know Christopher Arnold, you just go and say, okay, my mom is talking about me at the McDonald Garden Center. Okay. I can't wait for this to happen. And so when Chris was coming up, he was a little guy. He wanted to play football. So the first year that we went out to play football, he was 10 years old, and he went to join the football team. And the first thing that happened was the coach of the football team took all of us parents, put us in a classroom. We sat in children's desks. And he said to us, you are not allowed to the field. You are to stay up above, because there was a down. We had to look at. You are stayed behind the fence at the field. If you come down the field, your child will come home with you. Do not come down the field. No one yells at my games. No one curses at my games. You are to remain behind the fence. And if your child is late, they will have to run laps. It will be your fault that they will be running laps. Well, we were scared to death. We didn't know what we were going. I was like, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, yes, sir. You know? And so I was like, okay. And so then my son came home and he's like, oh, mommy, I'm going to play football. And they say we have to boil boil our tooth thing, the thing you put in your mouth. Mouth guard. So you had to boil it. I'm like, boil it? Yeah, you boil it, then I put it directly into my mouth. Now, that didn't make any sense to me whatsoever, to put a boiling thing into your mouth. But for him, he was all excited. So I was like, I don't care if you burn yourself. All right, so just put it in your mouth. So he did, and so we got that. And then he was like, and I need a jock strap. Well, that's a whole nother story. We're not going to go into that one today. But I'm here to tell you, as a single mama, that was something I had not experienced up to that point and such. So finally, he's all decked out and ready to go, and get them there that first day after school. And I didn't feed him right away because we left from school, and I got him there, and I stand at the fence with my fingers into the gated fence, and along with the other parents who are all looking down at our children to the fence, because we know if we go through, we're in trouble, so we don't do anything. And I watch, and then it goes to practice, and I watch as he abuses my child. Well, okay, he's just a coach, but he's used my child. He's like, they have to do sit-ups and push-ups and running and everything, and it's called conditioning, and it's in order to keep them healthy and safe when they play football. All I knew was that boy looked like he was dead tired. He came home, he fell asleep in his spaghetti, literally fell asleep in his spaghetti, his head in the spaghetti. I'm like, man, we didn't get any homework done, nothing. So I went to bed. He went to bed. And so the next day, he gets up. We're getting, we go again. I feed him first this time. We do a little homework first this time. And then we get over there, get in there in time. I stand at the fence. But this time I'm like, I don't have to stand here anymore. Then I realize, oh, I can read a book. I ain't got to even watch the practice. So I go back to my car sitting there, and I'm like, yeah, I'm reading a good book. This is good. I'm loving this. And I'm like, yeah, dropping the kid off. I got a couple. I'm good to go. And so, we went Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I don't know how many days they were there. But I know on that last day, which I think was a Thursday, he'd been there for 4 days. And on that day, we got in the car to go back to practice. And I pull up and I said, all right, you got to get out. And my son doesn't move. I said, baby, you got to get out. He doesn't move. Well, I take a look over and my son has tears rolling down his face. And I say, baby. Now, let me explain. I am not actually the most compassionate mother in the world. So I'm doing this in between trying to hold in the laughter from this, but I do love my son. I just, I'm just looking at him like, what's wrong? And he says, I hurt all over. I'm not really compassionate at this point because you wanted to play football, but I didn't say all that. And I'm like, oh, okay. He said, everything hurts. And so I finally get a tad of compassion, and I said, oh, baby. And I said, Chris, I am so proud of you. You did more than I could ever have thought. I don't know how you got through this week. I am so proud of you. So here's the deal. If you want to stop, you can stop right now. And you've done well. However, if you do not stop right now and you continue on, you may never have this moment again.
Okay, Mr.
Because when we start something, we finish it. Tears just flow down his face. And then he believes the lie. And he says it. Coach said, we are all important to the team. My son would not play in a game until they were up by at least 20 points. But at that moment, he believed the lie. We are all important to the game. I said, all right, you gotta go. So he sits there and then he puts his helmet on. He opens the door. He gets out on his side. I get out on my side. He starts to walk to the field. And I say after him, "You're late." You are cool. And his shoulders heave, and when he gets down there, he says, "Run a lap," and I can watch my son crying and heaving and running, and he makes it, and he never quits again.
You really said to him, "You're late." I did. Oh my God. Oh my.
I couldn't resist.
What great stories, you guys. So we got about 4 minutes. Okay, somebody called in. I said the website incorrectly. Hampton Storytelling .art
Right.
is the website to go to. Hampton Storytelling .art. And now there you will find bios of all of the professional, regional, local, and professional storytellers that will be speaking, as well as the schedule for where they will be speaking, the workshops that will be happening, and so forth. Janice, this was your idea to put this together?
Yes, it was.
And tell me why.
Somehow last fall I got concerned about my dash, and I said, really, I've done a lot of stuff, but what have I done that's really been meaningful? And I'm so concerned about people not talking to each other, about people having issues, not being able to discuss them, without a whole lot of anger and all the violence. Mm-hmm. And this is not the way we want to set examples for our kids. Mm-hmm. So, and everybody does have a story, and Hampton has changed so much since I grew up. All the diversity, all of the opportunities. I wanted people to come together, hear stories, and begin to talk to each other. Amen. And so that was really why I did it.
Yeah. And Sheila, this is not, since you speak all over the country, do you normally see a lot of African Americans at storytelling festivals?
I don't. And we need to have more African Americans and minorities in general come to festivals, but they need to also see us. Well, you will. You'll see folk that look like you at the festival. And once you come, I will say this. Once somebody comes, they get hooked.
I agree 100%. I got, we were talking before the show where I became exposed to storytelling festivals at Colonial Williamsburg several years ago, but it is an experience that you will not regret. So please go to the website, hamptonstorytelling.art. Tell your friends, bring your kids. This is something that's wholesome, healthy, that everybody can be involved in. There are grown-up stories, there are young people's stories, there are intergenerational stories, everything. And I can't wait to see you ladies and perform. That is just fantastic. Absolutely. So, and there is no fee. Is that correct?
No fee.
Come on, it's free. Best opportunity on the East Coast. Yes, indeed.
Oh, gosh. Okay, that is hamptonstorytelling.art. It's going to feature national and regional storyteller showcase, if I could talk. And then there's a storytelling academy for adults, teens, and children, and local storyteller showcase. It's all happening July 14th through 22nd, 2023. It is free for everyone. So come on out and see the folks. And we hope you enjoyed this edition of Another View. If you'd like to hear it again or share it with a friend, please visit our website, anotherviewradio.org, and download the podcast. And please, if you haven't already, sign up for our eView newsletter. It's a once-a-week reminder of upcoming shows. So guess what's happening on Another View next week? For all of you out there who have been calling me year after year going, "Where's Bill Thomas?" Bill Thomas will be back on Another View next week, along with Carol Pretlow, Roger Chesley, and Will Levis, the original roundtable for our show next week. So be sure to join us. Our theme music is an original composition created especially for Another View by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Jordan Christie is our audio engineer, and Dr. Barry Graham answered our phones. I'm Barbara Hamley. family. Make it a great weekend, everyone, and let's get together again next Thursday at noon for another view.
Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, partnering with donors from all walks of life to improve southeastern Virginia through grants, scholarships, and leadership initiatives. Learn more at hamptonroadscf.org.